Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. We're looking at a wonderful European paradox. A small state cuts its own income, raises its own fuel costs, and calls it a strategic victory over Russia. On paper, it's sanctions. In practice, it's a tax on its own economy. Lithuania has decided to stop the rail transit of Russian petroleum products to Kaliningrad and to limit how much diesel trucks can bring in their tanks from Russia and Belarus. Officially, this is about sanctions and closing illegal schemes. In reality, it is about three less glamorous things: fuel price arbitrage, lost transit revenue, and political signaling inside the Western camp. Let's put some concrete numbers on the table. Until now, around 300 to 370,000 tons of Russian petroleum products a year were moving through Lithuania to Kaliningrad, much of it linked to one major supplier. For Russia's total fuel balance, this is noise. For Lithuanian railways and related services, it is a stable revenue stream that now goes to zero. At the same time, the price gap at the pump is huge. In Lithuania, diesel has been around 1.6 to 1.7 euro per liter. In Russia, roughly 0.9 euro in dollar terms for much of 2024 to 2025. So every full truck tank crossing the border carries not just fuel, but a 60 to 80 cent margin per liter. On a 1,000 liter tank, that's 600 to 800 euro of potential profit. No wonder the fuel is mysteriously disappearing between the border and the next gas station. Here's where the story stops making sense. Instead of admitting that its own tax policy created this arbitrage, the state declares war on the symptom. It caps tank volumes and kills transit. If you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this: whenever politics and price gaps collide, the politician will always blame the foreigner, not the tax code. Now, the basic physics and money: Kaliningrad is an exclave. It needs tons of diesel, gasoline, and other fuels every year. And historically, part of this was covered by rail transit via Lithuania. And we are not talking about millions of tons. A few 100,000 tons is enough to keep local gas stations stocked. This transit provided Lithuania with rail fees, port and logistics services, jobs in the corridor. It also provided something else: legal flows against which illegal side streams could quietly grow. On the Lithuanian side, fuel prices are not high by accident. In EU countries, taxes and excise typically account for close to half of the retail fuel price. You are not just paying for oil and refining. You are paying budget revenue, climate policy, road funds, and various green ornaments stacked into the liter. On the Russian side, domestic fuel is kept cheaper for political reasons. It's a classic internal subsidy. The state takes money on exports and taxes, then holds down prices at home. The result is simple: a driver filling a truck in Russia and emptying part of that tank in Lithuania is not inventing corruption. He is just reading the price signals more carefully than the Ministry of Finance. This is the part no politician wants to explain on TV. They prefer to talk about smuggling from an aggressor state, not about the spread created by their own decisions. Now, the players and their incentives. Lithuania first. As an EU and NATO member on the front line, the political incentive is clear: be the most principled in the room. That means maximum alignment with US sanctions, maximum distance from Russian trade, and minimum questions about the bill. Banning transit linked to sanctioned companies fits perfectly into that logic. So does limiting diesel in truck tanks under the slogan of fighting illegal imports. At the same time, the state wants to protect its own tax base and fuel retailers. Every liter bought from a Russian truck instead of a Lithuanian station is excise tax lost and margin shifted abroad. A 200-liter cap per truck is not some moral gesture. It is a very practical way to ensure that more diesel is bought inside Lithuania at 1.6 to 1.7 euro per liter instead of quietly siphoned out of a foreign tank. The United States has a different calculation. Its priority is sanctions, discipline, and pressure on Russian energy exports. If a small EU member stops earning a few million a year on transit, that is politically useful. It signals unity and costs Washington nothing. The legal regime of secondary sanctions encourages overcompliance. So a route that was tolerated yesterday suddenly becomes too risky today. The message is clear: if you want to stay in the good club, you close the valve. Russia, in turn, adapts. Kaliningrad has sea access, port infrastructure, and even its own floating LNG terminal after the 2018 to 2019 gas transit scares. Redirecting 300 to 400,000 tons of fuel from rail to tanker is not a strategic catastrophe. It is a logistics bill and a propaganda opportunity. Moscow can claim that unfriendly neighbors are blocking transit, justify more state support, and quietly reroute the flows. Here is where the story stops making sense again. The punitive gesture hurts the intermediary more than the target. The Kremlin loses a cheap route. Lithuania loses stable transit income inside an already struggling rail system. The EU as a whole looks slightly schizophrenic. On one side, Brussels preaches market integration, freedom of movement, and fighting fragmentation. On the other, member states are now regulating how many liters of diesel can sit in a fuel tank at a border. This is not a liberal market. It is a controlled zone where price spreads are policed selectively, tolerated in corporate profit, punished when a truck driver touches them. If you're in Germany or Poland, I'm curious how this looks from your side, purely moral policy or another quiet cost added to the logistics chain that keeps your supermarkets full. What does all this mean for ordinary people? For Lithuanian households and businesses, it is straightforward. Fuel remains expensive. The state closes one source of cheaper diesel, preserves its excise revenue, and then complains about competitiveness problems and pressure on industry. Transport companies pay more per kilometer, farmers pay more per hectare. Small firms that live on tight margins lose another way to shave costs. At the same time, the state budget still has holes. Transit income disappears, railways need more support, and the political answer to every problem is the same. More EU funds, more green grants, more debt. The citizen pays 3 times at the pump, in the ticket price, and in future taxes servicing the public debt. For Kaliningrad residents, life does not improve either. This region already sits among the more expensive fuel markets in Russia, with prices well above average due to logistics and supply constraints. Shifting from rail to sea transport does not make fuel cheaper. It makes it more complex and slightly more fragile. The federal center will not allow shortages, but it will not prioritize low prices there over the rest of the country either. So the exclave lives with higher costs and more political tension on its borders. For the wider Baltic region, the pattern is familiar. Every new sanction measure, every new restriction on unfriendly flows is presented as a strategic move against Moscow. But structurally, it means this: higher transport costs, less transit, less trade, and more dependence on external financial transfers from Brussels. Instead of being a corridor of goods, you become a corridor of troops and a consumer of subsidies. This is the part no politician wants to explain on TV. It is easier to talk about security than to admit that you are slowly dismantling the business model that paid your bills for decades. If you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this: when you weaponize infrastructure and fuel flows, you are not just punishing the other side, you are rewiring your own economy in ways that are very hard to reverse. In the end, Lithuania's decision on Kaliningrad transit and truck tanks is not about a few 100,000 tons of diesel. It is a small fragment of a bigger shift from pragmatic transit state to ideological frontline state. That shift has a price, and it's not paid in speeches, it's paid in euros per liter. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids, systems do.